an artist really is anyone who kind of like can changes the world around them on whatever level that is, no matter how like minuscule or how large. And everyone that's kind of like planted on this earth is by just like standing and breathing in air. It's shifting around particles and doing stuff and affecting their surroundings. So I'd say
Mm.
like even without the definition and defining oneself as an artist, everyone in some capacity is an artist.
This is the Infinite Vizionz Podcast, a show to inspire your curiosity about life through conversations with artists and their stories.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Paige Hardy. Have you ever found yourself asking yourself, can I make money off my art? Will it make a difference if I follow this dream? Well, on today's episode of the Infinite Vizionz Podcast, Isaiah Forte-Rose comes to talk about the glamorous and not so glamorous lifestyle of filmmaking, how he replicated his dream into fruition, and he breaks down how he feels about success and what it is to truly be an artist. But before we get into today's show, a little bit of shameless self-promo. Please give this show a subscribe or follow if you like the show, and you can get those handy-dandy notifications once a week when we drop our episodes. If you like this episode, please also give it a share so we can share our content with the rest of the world and help this show grow just a little bit more. And lastly, if you'd like to support the show even more, you can purchase my art show merch, or also donate through our Patreon account. All the donation links are in the descriptions below. But anywho, enough of that. Let's get into the show.
Today, we have a great friend of mine. He is an artist with the tools of filmmaking and directing. You're an actor, you do script writing, and much more. Recently, you just had Circle of Bulls and Tale of Shadows premiered in the Reels Film Festival. And as well as just always working and reaching for the next thing. Thank you so much for joining me, Isaiah.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to come on.
Man, oh man, this is so exciting. So today's topic is about what is an artist. So I feel like with this new podcast and being wrapped up around the idea of being, myself being an artist and separating this Infinite Vizionz brand into something that's more of a podcast, something that's more of a focused points. So what is an artist? I threw this at you like 2 minutes before we hopped on. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, perfect. I love spitballing.
Great.
Yeah, an artist really like it's such an all-encompassing term. I'd honestly like obviously an artist is anyone who defines themselves as an artist. But I'd broaden that scope honestly, and I'd say that everyone is an artist in some way, shape, or another. It's art's the act of creation, and it's kind of this and as we've discussed on other podcasts, destruction as well, as destruction being a form of creation. An artist really is anyone who kind of like can changes the world around them on whatever level that is, no matter how like minuscule or how large. And everyone that's kind of like planted on this earth is by just like standing and breathing in air. It's shifting around particles and doing stuff and affecting their surroundings. So I'd say like even without the definition and defining oneself as an artist, everyone in some capacity is an artist. A lot of it comes down to once you get into more of the deep levels of what like kind of lets people define themselves as an artist, it's that feeling of like
Expression.
self-awareness. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like connecting to human emotions or just emotions in general, and kind of just trying to work something out and kind of like
and
share
just
something.
and being able to project their what's up here into what's out. And I think that's why I wanted to start off this episode actually as what is an artist, is because being an artist, I think for me, is exactly what you hit on. And that's what I thought about too, is, on this show, I don't want to just have artists on. And well, what is an artist? An artist is technically anybody and everybody, just depends on what you want to consider yourself an artist at. So I felt like that was a great way for me to just kind of open up to everybody and show them that, with this show, I want to have on a wide variety of people. Like, I don't want to just be subjective to photography, graphic art, filmmaking, people who are in my natural realms of what I consider myself as an artist, but just in the possibilities of everything out there. Because I mean, there's people who make, have you ever seen that dude who makes the really tiny minuscule sculptures on a piece of graphite at the top of pencil tips?
I think I've like barely seen it before, but like I came across my feed at one point. And I was just like, that is amazing.
Like it's so fascinating how much we can create as individuals and what we can create things out of.
Well, Paige, I've always had like this idea to it, that like I think there's an unspoken love relationship between those who define themselves as artist and scientist, because I definitely think that like art is kind of this form of experimentation and almost using the scientific method in a way to come out with something that reacts to the psychology of people. I think scientists in a lot of ways kind of like tap into that. And even if you want to like, I totally think that chefs and stuff are what they like do with like a palette, totally artistry. All they're doing is chemistry, like chemistry and organization.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's another thing. Chefs and people who are able to manipulate like the different senses that we have, taste, touch, smell, and visualization's obviously the biggest one, that we mainly think of when we think about art. But you're right there on the money. It's that creativity, I think, is the baseline of it all, though, right? Like you've got those artists and you've got the scientists, but at the end of the day, both of them just want to create and figure out something new and fascinating and like just learn about this unknown and what can come out of it. And I think that's the coolest part, is that anybody can be an artist. It just, what do you want to create? Like, what do you want to create?
There's always like this through line where it's like scientists want to explain. I think artists equally want to explain, and each of them want to be understood. Scientists on a grand level of like, this is what Earth and reality is like, this is how we understand it. And artists are like, this is what I'm like on my little tiny level. It's like, please understand where I'm coming from. And I give it to the people to experience it with me.
But I mean, you're definitely right on that. I mean, there is more of I feel like a publicly exposed, like when it comes to scientists, right? Like scientists are like, okay, I have this idea. This is what I think. You have your form of, evidence and theories and hypothesis, and you do your experiments and you have data backing it up, and other people agree with you and continue on that process of research, etc. But then you also have artists who, you'll have them collaborate or have a certain idea, and then they'll build off that and dig into it deeper. And then maybe you'll have other artists surrounding their same realm grab onto that idea and bring it even further, whether it's, on music, film, photography, whatever you want to consider it, even painting, any facet. Those are just obviously the ones come to mind because that's what I do. But I think there's that similar level, though. It's just the different perspectives of that reality. It's what are you necessarily focusing on is obviously going to differentiate everything. But at least in the understanding of almost the process that the brain goes through to finding these creative outlets, like they're very similar. I think the fun thing is seeing the contradictions, but also the similarities between science and like art, because of you've got that natural base level of Mother Earth and everything biologically that is in the Earth's DNA to just be this beautiful, explainable forms of art in its own sense. And then you have scientists always trying to figure it out. Well, sometimes science can't always figure things out. Sometimes you need that different perspective, that less, I guess, like strategic, not strategic point, but that certain other level of where the brain breaks up between like that art form and science, and being able to see the world from that other perspective.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with like talking about perspective in there, because that's a lot of what it is just kind of like evaluating on perspective these abstract thoughts that kind of like are either subjective or have technology hasn't been able to catch up to explain in some shape or capacity. It's like
Mm.
there's always that thought experiment that you have. I feel like everyone kind of gets it once they're like in that artist realm. You probably have it like right towards the end of high school where you have that conversation with your friends where you're like, what if your purple is my blue, or what if your purple is like my like pink or something like that, green, any color like around, where it's like, what if what you're seeing is completely different than what I'm seeing? And the only way that I could express that is by like morphing and melding and doing all these different like kind of weird things to kind of like show
Show.
what my subjective reality through this brain that definitely is only perceiving like what would be objective fact, and morphing and doing a bunch of weird little like Play-Doh things to be like, okay, this is probably close to accurate, and then
Ex-
like showing it between people.
Yeah, exactly. It's where like science tries to explain the reality of what is on this dimension, this plane, like what we can touch, what we can physically like comprehend versus what we can see from our mind and how we perceive everything coming from that creative's perspective. I think that's also a good way to kind of differentiate the two is, a lot of scientists try to have a baseline understanding of this reality where a lot of artists are like, there's more than one reality.
Yeah, right. Like how you interpret that reality goes into so many different like facets and ways and branches off into certain different things. It's like Van Gogh, where it's like he was so like different and iconic with all of his paintings because like because of his mental illness and everything along
Yeah.
those lines, and like it gave him a different perspective. It might not have been like, it definitely didn't like make his it made his life like a living hell in that capacity, but it did give him a different perspective, and like
Hmm.
you aspired to share that with people.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the just watching his art transform over the different periods of his life, like that was one artist that stuck out to me a lot when I was learning about him back in like the grade school art class. We went through all the different periods. I specifically remember like the blue period, and obviously you've got all the infamous paintings as well, but I think one thing that, is seeing that psychology, right? That breakdown of him throughout his life and how he chose to express himself through each different time of his life. He had it's that change, it's that transformation. And I think you can see a lot of that in artists, but it's obviously when there's more emotion behind something like what he was creating, you could really, really see the differences. But obviously, I think we should all go through consistent changes. But obvious on a good note, not necessarily on a bad note. He did, if you look into the life of him, he definitely did not have the happiest life as an artist. But I think it's an interesting like thought to think about, though, is just that completely different reality of what you're seeing versus somebody else. And I talk about this quite consistently, not I feel like in my daily life, at least I try to. Perspective is huge, and there's a lot of people I think that have neglected like just the ability to stop and take a moment to think about other people's perspectives. There's a lot of not only this instant gratification, but just these instant responses. I mean, trust me, it's something I had to filter and work on and still work on pretty consistently, not letting that natural ego like slip and allowing yourself to just like take moments of contemplation and be like, okay, where is this coming from? Is something that if I'm upset about a situation, and am I the one being like actually yelled at? Did I do something wrong? Like, or is this just coming from someone else's, maybe they had a bad day, maybe they're just getting their anger out and just learning how to take that out of body less personal as
Mhm.
well, and being able to separate like assumptions and integrating that into perspective as well to be able to best work out any situation. So it should be something I think more people should integrate.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to even on that note ask, have you watched anything from Maya Deren before?
Maya Deren. It sounds familiar, but not anything that pops off my head.
She's a real experimental film artist, and she used to delve into these topics inside of her films that were dream state kind of films, where she had like this style to them where they didn't make sense narratively per se, but they would like kind of, they jump all around the place. There'd be incongruity, like there'd be just like kind of like weird things that would happen inside of it that would throw you off, and you'd be kind of left by the end of it feeling kind of like what just happened, and you'd feel like you had watched like a lucid dream through the state of it. And it was like, it's kind of this real cool way to subvert, like, experimental artistry is cool in general,
Yeah.
but like they tap into something that's really nice about like subverting your expectations of what stuff has to be. Like any kind of like, you can hear people constantly talk about how art turn like the abstract movement and like all the different like stuff where it's like, I could paint a line on the canvas, but it's like it's shifting the narrative of what art can be, and it's like it's bringing you new perspective and letting you like broaden your horizons of comfortability, because there's so many like opportunities that we miss out on just because of like the comfort zone. And it's like there's a limit to it where it's like, that's like your comfort zone's meant to keep you safe and make sure that you're like able to kind of like be in a healthy environment, but also to an extent your comfort zone is like can be irrational at points and keep you away from some of the best things that you can experience.
Yeah.
And like a very like slow kind of like drip of like broadening that comfort zone, I think is healthy for everybody. And I think that artist just strikes my mind right then and there as someone that's able to kind of like bash in on those like those walls that have been built up inside of our heads. I think you would really enjoy.
Yeah, no, you'll definitely have to send me over some links. That sounds like something I would definitely be interested in for sure. And speaking of dreams, like that's something that fascinates me in a whole different world. Like, I mean, as of I think maybe I don't know, 3, 4 months ago or something around those lines, I found some like so little tidbit of knowledge. I'm like, okay. So, I mean, aside from the fact that, I already knew our brains naturally produce DMT, especially when we're sleeping, and that's what helps produce these dreams. The little tidbit that I found was basically about eating and your digestive process and how your brain produces DMT. It produces more DMT when you go to bed on an empty stomach than it would on a full stomach, because your brain's not deep processing. I mean, not your brain, your body's not deep processing food. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to do a little experiment. I'm going to make sure that I don't eat for like up to 4 hours before I go to bed from, said point on, and try to test out my dream. So I used to try to do a dream journal. It's hard to always consistently do that, because when you wake up, you have to force yourself to be in a remembrance state of what you just saw before you snap into this reality again. And that is not easy to do, because, I mean, as we all know, the amount of time allotment that we have to remember dreams is very short.
Yep.
So short. So I started trying to, I'd wake up, I would write something down. I would try to, differentiate, okay, like this subconscious vision was because of the fact that I watched, some Earth show before I went to bed. Or, one thing that was really fun, I was watching a lot of like Kung Fu and like Taekwondo, like just MMA and fighting stuff. And when like 1 week, 3 dreams in a row, I like had some sort of fighting resemblance. And it's when you're able to take the time to like be like, okay, like this is what I remember. The more you catch those patterns, the more you're able to integrate it into what your subconscious is doing. Like being able to wake up and like know, okay, I know this part of my dream was from something I watched before I went to bed, versus the other parts of your dreams that are just intensely can be creative. And that's one thing I found myself becoming just so like infatuated with, was just the creative endless possibilities that are in our subconscious that we are not actively aware of when we are awake. Even the amount of times where I've gone to just like, I go to meditate, and when I'm just listening to music, or just as soon as I close my eyes before I really get into a state, or when I'm in a certain state of like thoughtlessness, I'll start getting these visions and like little projections of just like random graphic art things that I could probably create. And I'll snap out of it and try to write it down. Obviously not like fully, but like I've had the amount of times where I've just like closed my eyes to relax for a second. I'm like, oh my God, I have an idea.
I've got it. Oh yeah, I've totally had to like snap myself out of like about to go to bed to go, oh, we gotta write that down. And it's funny, yeah, I find that my dreams definitely are like a like direct line into like probably like anxieties and stuff, but like they create like they say that like all horror is like some aspect of like a reflection on like anxieties of the times and stuff like that, and like a lot of those like are immensely creative, but like it's crazy because my dreams are always like existential as all that, and I'm just like who's sitting there and dreaming up these things that are just like wild bonkers, like super just the most like weird stuff that you can kind of grab at, and then I'll wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what's kind of making you a little scared right now. Okay, we gotta hatch that one out there for a second. I think it's real healthy. Like dreams are great because like they can kind of like therapy, let you like know what you need to work on and kind of go from that state.
100%.
Yeah, right. And like as an artist, I'm always stuck in like a perpetual state of like daydreaming.
Yeah.
I have to like keep an eye out for it because like I'll totally switch from like the A waveforms of the brain to like the B waveforms while I'm driving and be like, huh, that would be a really cool scene. Medium shot there. Oh my God, where am I?
I do that so often, and like I'll catch myself like I'll be on that wave like down the rabbit hole, and I'll be like, oh, I had things I have to do. Like,
So like I wonder, like, do you also get like, because like I'll see like a picture in my head, like it'll be like a detailed, like I'll see it, and I could be like basically watching a movie scene, and I just like won't see what's in front of me basically.
depending on the situation, like depending on like where I physically am, and depending on what I'm like thinking about. If it's something where I'm talking to someone about like a graphic art or like someone's explaining to me an idea, I'll start like boom right there. Like I will just see it. They're talking to me and I'm staring at a wall. I'm like, no, I see it. You don't think that I see it, but I actually see it. Mm-hmm. And it is weird thinking about that though, because it's literally just that projection of like, because if we just close our eyes, it would be the same thing. I would probably be actually a lot more vivid. I mean, that's usually what happens to me is when I close my eyes, it's just like, wow, it's right there. And that's just the amount of things that our brain can do is wild. And we're so untapped to like the truest potential of where we can go. And that's why I think it's fun to experiment with stuff like this, especially being an artist and being able to be like, okay, so I had this dream and it gave me an idea and now I want to do it. Like, and then once you execute that, I feel like the connection between almost knowing that that was an idea from your subconscious and that you created it into this reality that we're in now, it's almost like a blissful feeling because it's an integration of wherever our natural source is.
Yeah.
You know, it's clearly us being able to grab an idea from another dimension, another parallel universe, another plane, another wavelength, you know, a string theory, whatever you believe in. You're able to integrate that into our waking idea of what reality is now.
Yeah, somebody once told me, it was either somebody or some interview that I watched.
One of the
but they were talking about like writing, and I think it applies to a lot of the different creative aspects. But it's like as a creative, your mind is like a machine, and the more input that you can like give and put into it, the more that it can produce. And so it's like one of those things where like you kind of, whenever you're in like a lull or a dead zone or like a writer's block, or kind of you just like aren't having like this creative like output, you like think that what you got to do is you're like, I just got to like hammer through it and like I'll figure out something. I just got to do something. When really like a lot of the time what it is like you got to step away and find like the source and kind of like find new things to implement into it and kind of give yourself like a new input, a new look, a new outlook on life. So like my technique a lot of times when writing or anything along those lines, like if I'm in a writer's block, I'll totally like step away. I'll go either like watch a movie, I'll go take a walk, I'll go on some adventure. Like I think at one point I was like feeling real like burnt out creatively, so I like took the dog I was fostering at the point. I was like, to the Outer Banks. I heard that there's some abandoned ship there. And so like, and had no idea where it was. Knew it was a 4-hour drive of a commitment, but I was like, driving will be fun. Just like go out there and you do some spontaneity. Yeah, just like go and just like find some new like kind of like experiences to import into your creative flow, and it'll definitely like help out like 1,000 times.
100%. I think stepping away from the regular routine, and not even just the routine, but just being able to just step away, take a new breather, take a new, fresh breath of air.
Oh yeah. What's that like quote from like Pirates of the Caribbean? I think it's like we surely must be lost in order to find something that's never been found, or something along those lines there. And like 100%, like I was like, oh, I didn't expect to get so like I identify with the statement so much from Pirates of the Caribbean, but that there like, because it's something I definitely like, I'm sure you can relate to it too. Like a lot of people will be with me in like cities and stuff like that, and I'll be like, huh, where's the car? I'll be like long away and like don't know where I am. They're like, how do you not know how to get back to places? I'm like, it's way more fun to figure it out. Just like be without a paddle and figure out what we find along the way. And half the time I find something cool.
Well, and I think it's also about being able to be like, it's okay to not have that paddle, and just learn how to appreciate the adventure for what it is in the company that you have around you.
Yeah, let go of the control. Just the world's chaotic enough. Enjoy that chaos for a second. Enjoy being
beautifully. It's beautifully chaotic.
Exactly. Like
I think yeah, it's Mother Earth, definitely has its own beauty and chaos hand in hand. Well, it's that yin yang. It's that balance.
Yes.
Well, tell me about how these films went for this film festival, because I saw you playing the video of it the other day, and you were like, "Ooh, it's premiering."
It's been a lot of fun. It's always nice when you start to get like recognition for like the work that you've been doing and able to like share it with an audience and everything along those lines. And it's always like a kind of interesting to, I was talking with the panelists there, and I think one person was asking me because they knew about like how the type of media that I like and how I'll like pull from like either like just different art forms in general, like the written or like the like more traditional painterly kind of stuff, or even like he was talking about like a video game with the sense. He was like, did Circle Bulls that like 2-pair on an adventure dynamics spur from like The Last of Us? And it's always interesting how like people see the connections, and I definitely can't say that like it 100% didn't, because a big part of my life and one of like the biggest like forms of influential like culture on me. But then it's also like I can see where like that kind of like there's always these like archetypes of story that kind of are like engraved, or kind of like there's no original thought.
It's all
like
transposed in just different ways.
And kind of like in unique forms of kind of like mishmashing and collab, like molding it together. And so it's always funny to see kind of like where people can see kind of like elements of stuff coming from. And I was telling him, I was like, no, actually it came a little bit more from this like punk like rock video over here, where I was like, that looks cool, that was like a fight scene, but I'm sure like subconsciously like there's this one part that was like, that's a really important story to me, I can mash these two things together to create something cool. So it's always it's an interesting time just to kind of like have an audience and see them kind of like sharing it and talking about it and kind of doing that stuff, things along those.
And kind of how they're breaking it down themselves, and seeing how their perspective kind of either matches up with, or even just like makes you question your own perspective on the movie. I think that's one thing I always get a kick out of, is when I show someone like a new graphic art piece I'm working on or something, and they'll like point something out completely left field, or have like see something completely left field where I'm just, wow, like, thank you for that perspective. Like, thank you for that. Like, because that's what I want. That's what I think art should do, is that art should be able to make people not like question it. Like, you shouldn't have to feel like you understand art. But yeah, so those archetypes, us being able to have a kind of a consistency along all these generations and just years of creating all the way back from, not just even creation, but just storytelling to begin with. I mean, you're even talking going back to when people were just around a campfire telling stories of each other. Like, that's where the archetypes really started creating. You've got all these different ones, and it just transformed into Hollywood. And even further, I mean, Hollywood, obviously in a positive way, because that could definitely be used as a negative connotation too.
But like we're story driven creatures, and we're social creatures as well. Like all the stuff that we learn is like, it's not like, or a good majority of it, like, is not instinctual. It's taught and passed down from generation to generation, and that's like even predating language. What like our means of like how passing on that knowledge are. Like, you have like stories of like the Great Hunt and everything along those lines, where it's like you have your great like tribesmen or whatever like that going on, like after like the big woolly mammoth or anything along those lines.
Yeah.
And you've got like your first beginning of it right there, where you've got hero villain, who's
Yep.
gonna win, like all this stuff. Like, what are the good things that we want to teach you that help you succeed in society? And that's just like kind of all the storytelling. Like,
It's
really
just
is.
those baseline morals that you're supposed to get out of them,
Yeah, it's malleability. It's stretchy. It's like one thing. It's funny when he asked me, it's like, is it inspired off The Last of Us? I had to take a step back and be like, is it actually? Because like, you see how it is, and like that's why it's so like such a big industry, like just art in general and film and like storytelling and all this other stuff, because like you can stretch that narrative, and you can it's about empathizing. Like, that's all like the human experience is
Yeah.
empathizing. You're tapping into that right then and there. It's like, that's what makes me empathize with it. That's what I know about it, and that's what I care about, and that's what's making me care about your own product.
Yeah, being able to be, or when you have certain storylines where people are like, oh, that person reminds me of a part of me, or I mean, they're just these beautiful lessons. As you grow, you learn so much, not only necessarily about yourself, but about everything else around you too. And then going back to these original movies that you found yourself so enthralled with originally, and then being able to go back and be like, I remember when I really liked that scene, but now I don't care for that scene as much as I care for this scene. Or I have more of an appreciation for this character now than I did for when I had it for this character, because I see things from a different perspective than when I first watched this movie. And it's just that passing down of the stories. It's just, I feel like the spiral effect is also really interesting to think about. Just that spiral effect of coming back to everything all the time, always, not just necessarily in movie related, but just in life in general, being able to like reflect back on everything again.
Well, there's a expression in African culture called Sankofa. I might be butchering how to say that, but Sankofa, and it was framed as like, we must go back in order to go forward, and that's been something that's been a very powerful statement to me, where it's like especially for people who have either had some form of trauma or anything along those lines, but I think just in general, you can't. A lot of people figure that you have to move beyond your past in order to keep on progressing. But I think even history books for US and everything along those lines, it's taught, and it's a healthy practice, that you have to circle around. You have to go, okay, this is where I've come from. And it's this idea basically where it's like, if you're going on a path that's a dead end for like 20 years, and like you find out after 20 years that it's a dead end, and it's not going to get you to your end goal that you've had this whole time, then if you've gone that whole entire path, then you like have to track all the way back without like any kind of look. But if you're like circular with it, if you're going back to go forward, then you can figure out what path you actually need to be on, instead of like being stuck in this rut, and just having like being so like stubborn and stuck to it with it, and like I'm gonna go this way and it's gonna land wherever it's gonna land. It doesn't have to be like that. You can divert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And like it's this idea of you can't expect anything to change by not changing anything.
Yeah.
Like it's people who, oh, well, woe is me. Well, what have you done to change the situation? Like you could sit at home on the couch hoping that things are going to change, but you know, there unless you get up and you do the work, they're not going to change.
Yeah.
And but going back to the whole like the spiral, like and the circularization kind of idea, be like that whole do the work thing. I mean, making that next step forward, that's being able to like realize, okay, well, what worked for me in the past and what didn't. And sometimes the things that worked in the past for us aren't necessarily going to work for the future, but it's always a good baseline to have an understanding of what you could be doing to being able to better yourself to where you can be.
100% agree.
But that's fun. That's fun. So the film was doing well. You got some pretty good feedback on it. What about so the Tale of the Shadows? I forgot what I don't think I recall seeing that movie.
Yeah,
That
actually,
little
that
film.
you can also find that one on YouTube right now. That one's was a real fun one. It was a product of the start of the pandemic, once everyone was inside and cooped up and nothing to do, and kind of like had a little bit more extra free time. And I think there was a some film challenge that was just encouraging people to go and shoot like a 1 minute short films and everything along those lines. So grabbed my roommate, who's also a film major, and got ourselves like the little amount of gear that we had sitting in our house going, and we just like, I think we had a very limited amount of time to actually get like some like films done, and we're just sitting there for like one night just brainstorming a bunch of like just spitballing ideas back and forth and being like, okay, what if we did this, what if we did this, what if we did this, and then I think like we ended up coming up with that one where we're just like, okay, what if it was completely like silent, and what if it was these two shadows, and what if it was like this real like kind of Charlie Chaplin style like exaggerated kind of body movements and things along those lines to convey the whole entire story. And it's like about these shadows, and one is trying to like win the heart of another one, short, quick, to the point. And we just did this like really like rom-com style thing. Hopped in there, me and my roommate both acted in it, we both directed it, we both shot it, and then we got like, it was hilarious. It was a hilarious looking setup because I think we needed a bright enough light. So we went to Home Depot and we grabbed like a work light and set it on like the floor. And I think in one shot, we like, one of us wasn't in it and we held it to make it like a sunset, while someone was like in the house, propped up a bike on some like pegs and like pedaled their heart out to make it seem like they were biking through a park. And then we shun the like big work light onto the back of us into this giant sheet of like fabric that we had like taken meticulously thumbtacked like to the whole edge of our apartment to fill up the entire like wall and stretch it where it like actually was able to like put the shadows onto it, and we just filmed it through it. It was a hell of a lot of fun. And then like we just like shot it, edited it as quick and dirty as we could. As soon as we were done with it, we returned the fabric to Walmart like the indie filmmakers that we are. Returned the work light too, cost us nothing. And they were like, great, we have a film now.
Solid.
Yeah, it was a lot of just like crafty like nature that went into that one.
Yeah, I actually it was quick and short, sweet. I actually found it when you were talking about it. It looks like it was a lot of I love the shadow play. You know, that's something that I feel like but it was such a great art when it was originally done back in like the silent film era, back when they used to utilize a lot more unique perspectives on how to create these stories and these emotions out of people. Because I mean, right, as we've seen nowadays, you know, right, like it's a lot of the similarities in the same way of filmmaking. So I think that's one of my favorite things just about short films and small films and film festivals like this is you get these creators that, you know, are able to just go completely out of the box, but also so far out of the box that they're grabbing a simpler box and just taking like these just basic ways of just appreciating an art and just creating something so beautiful with it that you almost forget that, hey, this was just made with a light and a sheet and our bodies as shadows.
Yeah, there's like one of my favorites to watch a lot of the time are found footage or archive footage films. And they're real cool because like everyone kind of has access to the stuff that's in them. Like it's literally just like, oh, like some newscast footage or like some kind of like public domain stuff. And they like add this new twist to it. Like one of the ones is like my favorite. It's like Lola's Day Out or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but it's literally about a fox that's escaped like a zoo enclosure, or I think it was fox. No, it was a leopard. It was a jaguar. I promise it's a jaguar. It was a jaguar that escaped this enclosure and it like killed a bunch of like animals and like the other one. And they like there's obviously, because that happened, a bunch of news stations covered it. And what they did is they took all that footage and they got like some voice actor or maybe the filmmaker themselves to like impose themselves on the footage talking about like talking at it like they're a psychopath and they're basically like planning like a mass like murder or something along those lines. And it was so interesting because after the first like 10 seconds, I was immediately sucked in. I was like, I had no questions that this like jaguar was a psychopath. And I was just like, that's amazing. That's like, I attributed like human characteristics to this like just literal animal in this way that was like, anyone could go grab that footage. Anyone could get a microphone and talk about it in the way like that they did that. Like, but it was just such a unique perspective that was like, I was sucked in.
That's what like I love is the ability to just transform someone's ideas while they're watching a film and being able to just put them in a whole different realm, like being able to put these human characteristics on this jaguar where normally in a regular day basis, like yes, you're gonna think that jaguar is harmful, like he would probably kill me. But the last thing in your head is creating this jaguar as a psycho killer, just having these intensive, almost just actions. And so that just being able to pull someone who's not used to even being pulled out of their own reality and pull them into your own reality or just another one in general, I think is such a powerful thing with art.
Every time I talk about this film now, I'm going to end up just like putting a new animal in it. Like it's about this turkey that like escapes its enclosure and it just like dashes into cranberry sauce farms everywhere. It's
Look, you could probably plug and play so many animals that would work. It would work either way. Oh man, that's good. So, I know that you've been messing around a little bit with some 3D creations.
I have.
How's that been going? I saw your donut. Good. I like your donut. It looked good.
The beginning tutorial that everyone goes through for figuring out how to do 3D modeling. Funny enough, how we're talking about experimentation and stuff like that, that came from my experimental class, where the teacher is awesome, first of all, for just including this inside of a syllabus, where he was just like, yeah, the assignment for this project is just, what do you want to learn? Like something that you've wanted to learn for a long time. This is a 30-day challenge. For 30 days, you're going to try at it and just go for it. Like, I don't care what it is, really, just do it. And I'm like, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right. And he's like, it doesn't have to be anything that pertains to film. Doesn't matter. And I was like, cool. And so I was like, I've wanted to learn Blender for a good while. So I like, because I'm just like, that software is just such a hard barrier to entry at some points. Like you can run it on a potato, but like it's just like has so many different things like that are in it that are just like, if you touch one button, you're like, where am I? And like, how do I do this thing? It's like anything with learning like a new software, but it's like just so many different options that are fleshed out, and we're like, how do I do anything?
That's how I felt when I first entered DaVinci Resolve, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try to create moving graphic art like lights. Oh, Paige, you're in for a wild world.
right? Like for me, my first shock with that one came when it was like, I think I had done Photoshop and Premiere, and I was like, okay, cool. I think I can do motion graphics. And I opened up After Effects. I went, where am I? This is nothing like that.
This is not home.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
We are not in Kansas anymore. That is great. But okay, so that's awesome that you have a teacher that's allowing you guys to integrate like your own goals and challenges into this class.
Absolutely. It's been a wonderful like learning experience, and like I've been very happy with figuring out that whole entire thing. And I think that it helps you like bring different things into each of your films for sure. Like experimentation was the name of the game for Tale of the Shadows, and you come out with a whole like different style that you're like, okay, that could work. It's like a whole bigger thing at some point potentially, or like just something that like works in general. Just like you get new like ideas. It's kind of like mixing like acrylics with watercolors. You experiment, you have some fun, you figure out something new, and you go, woo.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's kind of how I found out my graphic art. I'm like, ooh, I like drawing on like this computer. Oh, I like taking photos. Oh, cool. I can make whatever world I want and integrate my photos at the same time. Bet, let's do this.
Like, right, Joss? Let's go.
I can make people look like superheroes all the time.
Oh my God.
But no, that's awesome that you got that both of them got into the festival. Just that exposure, like you were saying, that validation, I think as an artist it's something that's just it keeps pushing you to want to keep going. I mean, there are definitely always, it's not like it's gonna make or break you, but having that knowing of, hey, like I did do that. Like there was a group of people who saw my art and from this perspective that they found it worthy enough. So like, why can't there be other groups out there? So continue that growth and continue that, and being able to just branch past that. I think that kind of hit me the other day when I got published in my first magazine for my photography.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's not out yet, but kind of that same thing where it was like, okay, like it was a goal, but it was like if it happened, it happened. If it didn't and not, like I know my own self-worth with my photography to be able to continue regardless of whether it happens or not.
Yeah.
But I did put the idea that I wanted it out there and I did pursue towards it. And then, comes the day where I got hit up to be able to be published. Now that made me think though, now are these your first two films that were in a film festival, or have you, because I know looked into festivals before for previous movies, but I wasn't sure if these are the ones that you've had in as like so far.
Yeah, these are the first two that I've had actually accepted into a festival. And I think that's also getting to like part of like getting to know the audience that a lot of these things have and where like I can submit to and everything along those lines. And also like just knowing how much you kind of have to like bang your head against the wall essentially to find that audience a little bit. Because like there's just so many different like so much content out there now and so many different festivals and stuff along those lines. Like you're like pretty stacked with like the ratio of like what you're going up against. And you just kind of have to like keep on kind of like throwing the seeds out there, and like they'll plant like somewhere eventually, and you'll find a place where like that audience lands and everything along those lines. And then it kind of like will start to snowball a little bit, because even now Mixed Head even got into a film festival. It is Vizionz Film Festival, which is coming up like at the end of this month. And then more festivals have reached out from that point on asking about like submission, me to submit and everything along those lines. So once people start to really see that like what you can do and stuff like that, and you can kind of like push through that barrier, it comes like it's kind of like that when it rains, it pours.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and also like you were saying, you have to find those certain, I don't want to necessarily say niches, but almost like a niche category of people that you're trying to reach out to with these film festivals. And then once you find that, that success, you're just like, okay, cool. So now you also know that it's easier for you to find people who are going to be along those same lines of what you were looking for to be able to produce content with, because of the fact that you were able to pick and choose exactly what you were looking for the first time around.
Yeah. It's like it's like performing music for like a live video, a concert or anything along those lines, where it's like you always want that recognition because like, and you always kind of like make content and like awareness of like an audience out there, because like it's never truly just for yourself. You're like you're delivering it to experience like a part of yourself with other people. And that's amazing, and that's something on itself. And as well as that, like I think you have to understand that, but also be able to take a step back with it and like reduce yourself to like the hobby side aspect of it as well. Like, cause I remember there was a point with photography. Photography was really my introduction to film, because that was like trying to get the composition right in one still frame and telling a story and capturing emotions through that. And for a while, I started doing a lot of headshots and pictures for people, and even videos spurred from that, where I was doing a bunch of it for paid like freelance work and everything along those lines. There's a section, I think a lot of creatives go through it, where you get burnt out, where you just had so much stuff and you're in a rut of doing the same stuff as well as doing a lot of it, where you're just tired, you're going through the motions, you're like, don't have that creativity for it. And that's when I really started getting into shooting on like 35 millimeter film, was because I was so wrapped up for a long time about how good the like product needed to be, and how like
clean and like spec, like with the
yeah,
equipment
like
and stuff that you
it's
used.
better than the last thing, and it had to reach my expectations, which are very inflated.
Feel that. I understand.
Film had something that was so nice about it, because like I would take my craft into it, the skills I already had from digital, of like framing the composition, everything along those lines. But as soon as I clicked that shutter, like it was gone. Like there's nothing I could do about it. I can't like delete that photo or I can't take 1,000 photos to get like the right, like just the minuscule right 3 millimeter little thing. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, it was either big enough of a fuck up where you need to do this again, and you're gonna like basically pay for it by like $1 for another thing of like another shot, or it's fine and you don't see it right now, and you'll figure out in like basically a nice little Christmas surprise later whether or not it was cool or not. And I thought there's something so nice about taking yourself back to like the hobby roots of it, and just like why you enjoy the thing that you do.
No, I 100% feel that. I actually, I kind of went through a similar experience. Unfortunately, did not unfold the way that I expected, except because I didn't have a 35 mil at the time, which I ended up finding one from my parents. So I have
Dang.
one now. I just need to get some new film.
Go to Southeastern Camera in Raleigh.
Yeah, I know they're good peoples over there.
Okay.
But the whole purpose of it was just being able to break myself back into that just origination of where photography came from, and stop being so focused on this digital art of it. And it's also why sometimes like I've been just doing some random photos and I'm just like trying to edit in different ways that I'm not used to editing, and allowing myself to be uncomfortable with the process.
Yeah.
Allowing myself to like take a photo, and while I look at it be like, but know in the back of my mind that I did that for a reason. Now, while it's still compositioned, right, it was me taking myself out of the frame of what I normally do and trying to accomplish something new and different, and pushing myself to edit as a way that I find looks good, and then release it to the public and see their responses. Because like you were saying earlier, we don't just create, we create for others as well as ourselves. So, always feedback is always, I think, just an important thing with being an artist. Constructive criticism
Oh yeah, absolutely.
is always one of the, I think, super important, especially if people can take it right, at least.
Oh, absolutely. And I realized as as you were speaking, I lied. The first film festival I actually got into was Honeyhead Film Festival, the underground film festival. And what made me think about that one again was where I was like, we were talking about your experimental methods and everything along those lines. I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me of my Hollywood travel vlog that I made. And that one was just a whole Mod Podge combo of me just like taking a bunch of B-roll of like the city that I was in, and then bringing it into like a place to kind of basically make like a travel log of just like what this new place like on the other side of the country that I'd never been to before like looked like, and what it was like to experience it. And even got a call while I was over there. But then it was me putting in the timeline and going, how far can I break this footage? I think the one I went farthest with, I didn't even end up like using. I personally love it a lot. And I like look at it from time to time. Like I data moshed a whole bunch of stuff in it, but like I just saw like how far I could break it. And then like once I got to that broken state, I was like, let's see how far we can like, where do we scale it back? And then, okay, that's the style for this film right here. It's cool to do new methods. Like it's cool to just like do stuff where it's like, we're in a digital age where like most of the stuff, how we're like doing things like, outside of like a physical media, like painting or stuff along those lines, a lot of it, like you can just kind of, you can go back. Like you can
Yeah.
always go back.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's one thing I love about my Photoshop art is I'm like, if I don't like it, I can just open up that good old PSD file and break out all the layers that are laid out. Well, unless I did something drastic to where it's I'm trying to correct something that I started in the beginning and there is no return at that point.
Oops, use the erase tool instead of the mask.
Just hope that the lines blend. No, but you're right though. It's having that opportunity to be able to go back. Like I did that recently with a lot of my older photos. Like I went back and tried to look through some of my older photos that I did from clients, and I'm just like, okay, let me pick out let me look through the ones that I thought that like the ones that I edited originally that I liked, and then like I would find ones that I'm just like, damn, that's a cool angle. Like that's a cool perspective. Like, ooh, I could see this edited that way. And just start re-editing old things, and just because you have this new idea, new perspective, because we're always in a consistent state of like trying to remind ourselves of what we need to do to be able to accomplish, and execute. But sometimes we forget like to allow ourselves to experiment and to break out of that. And I think being able to, again, circling back to the circle effect, ironically enough, that's one thing I think that's important to do with your art as well. I mean, especially if you are, mainly an artist, is just that reflection of how far have I come,
Yeah. Back up what we do with craft, and craft is just putting in the hours and putting in like working at it like consistently and going at it, and just like dedicating yourself to like actually like making something instead of making something good. And like the fun thing is you never have to release anything. You don't have to show people. So just like, when you do stuff, and then you come back and you're able to like be like, okay, this doesn't work, and I know it because I've tried it out, and I know why it doesn't work because I've tried it these different ways and I've figured out what goes behind it. Or vice versa. I know why it does work because I've done it.
Exactly. And it allows you to learn a little bit more about yourself and your style and how you just want to go about it. And I mean that I think that applies to so many things aside from just art itself, just a lot of things just in life in general.
Yeah.
So that's just been awesome, man. This has been such a great podcast. I've been so, like I said in the kind of the beginning, just it's been a very freeing feeling being able to start something that I wasn't comfortable with originally in 2018, and being able to see myself now taking on the adventure of doing a show by myself with no creative boundaries, and being able to just fully express myself as is, and on this Infinite Vizionz podcast. It's a podcast so sick you'll need an IV drip. I'm gonna figure out how to integrate that, I promise. I will. Thoughts and feedback is always appreciated. Obviously, this is the first episode, but I'm gonna try to do my best. And for when I do start releasing these, I will have already a few in the backlogs and ready to go for everybody. I want to make sure that I really take my time when it comes to the content that I'm producing now. Like you said, right? Like we can produce good stuff and we can produce bad stuff. Doesn't really matter, but we like what we release. That's up to us. And I think being able to step away from doing live episodes and having to focus on being just on point because of the fact that you're live. Like I love the vulnerability. I love the stress of it. Like it is fun in that way, but it also breaks down a lot of who I am to not allow Paige to be fully expressive, if that makes sense. I have to focus on being more of this attentive host than I am being able to be such a great, engaged in the conversation and be more of a conversationalist and being able to break open these ideas of not just what we're talking about, but also my perspective on it. And, I think it's going to be really transformative. I'm excited to see how people take the show and transfer over from, just my other podcasting world into this podcasting world, and seeing all the artists that are going to come out here, whether they're any form of artists or just human beings in general. I'm so happy that you got to, I've got you on as my first show, my first episode, Isaiah, like as you're one of my very good friends here and that I met in North Carolina, especially in the artist world. So I'm glad that, the first main topic that we could talk about is something that brought us together in the first place.
Right, just hits home. I'm so excited for you. I'm so proud of you, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this thing goes.
Thanks, man. Well, is there anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, I've got 2 things that are gonna end up releasing here in a bit that are gonna be very fun. We're at the very least we're going to be finishing up with our newest short film, Bad Deal, which is a arms deal gone wrong film, and we'll be trying to get that into festivals and get that circulating and potentially releasing it by the time that this comes out. As well as we will probably have a dope Kickstarter with a bunch of rewards going up for another short film called Alpha, which is going to be a comedical satire about the masculine culture that we all navigate around. And I think it's going to be an excellent project to follow, an excellent project to be a part of and share, donate to it, and just be with the team that's going to be all around there. Just a group of great people and funny individuals. It's going to be a blast.
That's awesome, man. I'm really excited. As you know, I always love watching your projects, being a part of them, helping out when I can, and just supporting and sharing. I think, that's where great place to end this off is just to remind everybody to support your local artists, support your local art. Your vendor is everything. Local is important, and art's important. Earth is just without art.
Exactly. Spice it up. Get yourself good art in there. Get some different art.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Isaiah. They can follow you at Isaiah Forte-Rose on Instagram. Also, Bad Meal Productions is where you release all of these videos on. So you can go follow him on Instagram and YouTube, or Vimeo too. Is that where you have a Vimeo account for that too?
Vimeo now as well.
Awesome.
Isaiah Forte-Rose on there also.
Sweet. Well, everyone definitely go give him a follow, go give him a like, and then once I have this podcast open, it'll hopefully have its own pod. Well, actually, I think I'm going to integrate it to my my Infinite Vizionz graphic art page. So we will be releasing these probably throughout that page as well. So everyone go give that a like and a follow as well too. I'm not sure where this podcast will take us, but I'm so excited. Little weekly show, and we will catch everyone next time for the weekly IV trip. All right, man. Thanks again so much for coming on. I'll talk to you soon.
Word. Peace out.
Bye.